تاريخ السودان حكايات مقاومة.
الثورة في الليلين، الثورة في الليلين.
الثورة دي هي مش الأولى.
ويجي يتكلم لي عن الدين وعن الفضيلة وعن عدم السرقة والقصة وهو أكبر.
احنا كنا بنطلع في المظاهرات صراحة ما عارفين نفسنا راجع ولا ما راجعين يعني.
الحصل يا هند إنه البرهان رئيس المجلس السيادي عمل انقلاب عسكري. الآن الشعب في عصيان مدني شامل. امبارح في القيادة سقطوا 8 شهداء، الإصابات فوق 120 إصابة.
ومن قتل الشاب وكأنما قتل الشباب جميعا.
كلهم في التنسيقيات أو في لجان المقاومة أو كانوا ناس مؤثرين.
بحياة أبوي عبد الوهاب كان بيحكي لي على حلم العالم العربي يتبدل في قاعدته وتحصل ثورة نسوية. البلد تغير زي سجن مفتوح.
وضح النهار أرأيت مسجونا أرأيت محصولا.
الشباب حزين، في قهر في غبين جواه، لكن أقوياء برضو، أقوياء يعني ما زلنا مستمرين.
Hi everyone, welcome to an episode of Carolyn Talks YouTube channel / podcast where I, your host Carolyn, Hayes, film culture critic and journalist, speak to film creatives around the world about their work, the industry, and what inspires them. And today I'm very happy to be joined by filmmaker Hind Meddeb to talk about her new documentary, Sudan, Remember Us, which chronicles the experiences of a group of young Sudanese people in Sudan around 2019, early 2020, just before the current genocide that's taking place began and after the former dictator Omar al-Bashir was, I wanted to say dethroned because he acted like a monarch, but he was removed from his position, so it was in that transition period. And the film really does take a look at how like the young people of Sudan use music, poetry, art to really express everything they want to say about the current state of events and everything that had been happening for decades earlier before. But this is not Hind's first film. Like, you've done so much films. You've done like Paris, Stalingrad. You did films called Tunisia Clash and Electro Chabi. And there's commonalities between all of these films that I want us to talk. But first of all, thank you so much, Hind, for joining me. Yay.
Thank you for paying attention to the film and helping us bringing people aware about Sudan.
No, for sure. I one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you is because on my social media, I'm very active on Twitter and Instagram, and I've been trying to do my part to raise awareness about the genocide, or I would call it now a Holocaust in Sudan, particularly I would say since early 2023, because I began on my Instagram. I knew of the genocides and the civil war and everything that had been happening in Sudan for like 20, 30 years. But I wasn't fully aware of how everything really does happen. It already began in spring of 2023, in April 2023. And the reason I found out was because I saw the viral video of Allah Salah, you know, when she was doing that super rhythmic chant, and like it went viral all over social media.
We have to celebrate Hala Salah. She's this woman that became the symbol of the Sudanese revolution. She went on a car and she was dressed in white and she looked beautiful with her earrings. And she started to say a poem. And the poem that she was chanting was saying, they kill us in the name of religion, they imprison us in the name of religion, but religion has nothing to do with that. Religion says you have to fight the tyrant for freedom. And that's a beautiful poem coming from a very old tradition of poetry, and she became the symbol of the revolutionary woman in Sudan, and she was dressed like the Kandakat. The Kandakat are these queens of Sudan from the beginning of the Rome area. It was like in 200, 300 after Jesus Christ, and these queens, they fought the Roman invasions, and they also represent the power of women in Sudan. And Ala Salah, she published a book in France with a French journalist where she's talking about her whole experience. I wish this book would be translated in English. And I met her. I got the chance to meet her. Now she lives in Manchester, where she's studying. And since this beautiful image of her, she got married, she had a kid. She's a beautiful woman, like all the Sudanese women I met when I was in Sudan.
Yeah, because that was 20. Because I saw the video after that
The
happened.
video was of her. It's before Omar al-Bashir fall. So it's 2019.
2019. So yeah, so that's about 6 years since then, but it has had such an impact. And the commonality that I saw between what Allah did and what you did in the what you do in the film is you highlight women. And in doing my research, I found that Darfur in particularly is a matriarchal society. And I wanted to ask you about going from there, just Allah, and then you have all of these different women, Maha, you know, and all these different women in the film, and they're kind of like central to the film. Talk to me about having these Sudanese women, these young women, be central to the film, because I wanted to ask you if that was intentional reflection of Darfur in particular being a matriarchal society.
Actually, unfortunately, my film is not about Darfur. And many times when we screen the movie, people from Darfur, they come to me after and they say, but you have to make a movie about what's happening in Darfur, which is much more terrible than what you see in my film, because in my film, it's in the capital, Khartoum. So you have people coming from all over the country to make this revolution and try to have a transition. But to be honest, the genocide was in Darfur in 2003, and the genocide is starting again since this war started. And the whole question of this genocide in Darfur is these people who are using the difference between African tribe and Arab tribe. So it's a very racist movement that is held by the militia, which is like spreading this propaganda that Arabs are superior to African people. And what I loved about Sudan is that it's a country with a lot of diversity. You have Arabs and you have many different African tribes. There is 500 different tribes in Sudan. There is 117 other languages than Arabic in Sudan. And the dictatorship of Omar al-Bashir was using this idea that being Arab is superior to Africa. And this is like the way they killed so many people. But the real reason of the genocide and what's happening in Darfur today is land grabbing, because every time there is a massacre, it's to take the land from the people, and then they sell it to Emirates, to Saudi people who needs this land, and they do these big farms, and everything is exported to these countries. And that's the big drama of what is happening. Also, all the resources, not all, but a big part of the resources, gold, uranium, is in Darfur. But my film doesn't talk about Darfur. My film is really only about the revolution that happened in the capital, where people came from all over the country and went to the capital to overthrow this terrible dictator who was like spreading a racist propaganda for 30 years and trying always to divide Sudanese people. And today we talk about a civil war, but it's not a civil war. It's a war of greediness. It's again people, the militia and the military, and behind them other countries and big companies. It's trying to steal Sudan and to take Sudan from its own people. And that's the drama of Sudan. And my film is showing the young people who tried to make a change and to reclaim their country. But to be honest, we should do another movie that would explain the reason of the genocide in Darfur and the reason of this land grabbing and all this racism that is spread. And it would be very important to do it because there is archives, but it was impossible to film in Darfur. When I was in Sudan, I traveled to Darfur, but I was arrested. They took the footage, and the militia already at that time, before the war, was controlling Darfur. So you're 100% right, and I think we have to, even if my film is not about Darfur, we have to continue to raise attention about what is happening in Darfur.
Yeah, because I was doing my research, and like, so for the genocide in 2003 sparked because of it was an ethnic genocide. It was about ethnic cleansing because the indigenous Africans, the Zagawa, Madali, and Fur, and it just spread from there. And then the UAE, the Dubai, the Saudi Emirates, they saw their opportunity to jump in, because they've been colonizing Sudan and like Western North Africa for so many years. And as you said, it is about greed. It's about the gold, it's about the natural resources. It's about the leather and the meat, and and taking all
the
of this
land. The land is so important. Nobody talks about the land, but it's so much about that, because when they burn a village, it's to take the land from the countryside people, from the farmers. And then these people find themselves on the road, refugees. And also it's very important to remind the people who are watching your channel that Sudan is always represented as a poor country, but that's the opposite. It's a very rich country that is been always still, like, people steal the goods from there. And Sudan doesn't need anyone. Actually, it's a country who could be a developed country, doesn't need to import nothing. And this is the terrible thing. And that's why in this film, what I am showing is these young people fighting to get their country back, to have their own citizen governments. And that's the meaning of the word Madaniya, which is one of the slogans that comes again and again in the film. People are dreaming of a Madaniya, and Madaniya comes from the word citizen in Arabic, Madani. So the Madaniya is literally power to the people, democracy in Arabic.
Yeah, they don't want to be refugees. They want to stay on their land. They love Sudan, they're Sudanese
Exactly.
to the core, and that's everything they talk about. They talk about their home in all of the poetry and the songs and the music that plays in the film. Everything is about them wanting to be on their home, like claiming Sudan. Sudan is a part of them, it's a part of their skin and their identity and everything. And so, like, when people talk about refugees with such derogatory terms and connotations, I'm always like, but they don't want to be refugees. They are refugees because colonial governments drove them out their homes. Violent armies, militias like the RSF and the Janjaweed drove them off their land, and they're like, I want to return. They're like, we want to stay, but they're willing to their land, but they're also like, we all can't stay, because if we all die, then Sudan disappears, Sudan and the people. And they talk about that a lot in the song, and they talk a lot about the struggle of being afraid of death, but then also not being afraid of death, and what that means, but like, if they stay, they die, and then if everyone stays and dies, what becomes of Sudan? Like, there's this dichotomy, this conflict that they're all talking about, like they're like, Sudan lives in us. So if we have to flee and we live, Sudan lives in us. But then Sudan becomes dispossessed through the people fleeing. And talk to me about that, because that's such an interesting dichotomy for these young people. And they're so young, like they're teenagers and they're their early 20s, but they have such a fundamental understanding of what being dispossessed of their land, being displaced, and being a refugee and being a citizen, and all of these complex ideas, and then come through in the poetry. If you really sit and listen to what they're saying, they're talking very philosophically in what they say and what they do in their art, and they come with all of these very complex ideas, and like anyone who sits down with watches the film, like they'll understand like how intelligent these young people are, and like how much they understand not only politics of where they are, but the global politics, because they understand everything that's happening externally, again, not only with the UAE and Dubai and all of these, but how like colonial governments like the US government and European governments support the UAE in giving them permission to continue to be,
and deliver the weapons.
Right, they supply the weapons. Like one of the girls, and one of them talks about the RSF being supplied with Russian weapons, and like she very distinctly points out, like, we're being killed with Russian-made weapons.
Yeah, because they exchange gold with weapons.
Right. So talk about that. But I'm just watching, just like you as the observer, having your camera, watching these young people go through such these really philosophical and conflicting ideas, and trying to figure out, like, what does all of this mean for me, especially at this point in time where they're now beginning their lives. They're going from teenage to young adulthood, and they have to deal with so much conflict, and they're like, what do we do? How do we start this out? So talk about just observing them doing all of that, because I thought you handled it. What you did in the editing really contextualizes a lot. And I know you probably had like so many hours of footage, but what you did with the editing contextualizes that, I think, really succinctly.
Yeah, you're perfectly right. Actually, you understood the whole reason of the film. Just what you said, like right now, is very inspiring because I really made this film to change how people represent themselves, Africa and Sudan. And since I do films, that's the reasons why I do films, because I grew up between Europe and Africa, and I also saw the huge gap there is between how African people are represented in mainstream media and in the mind of white people, and the reality on the ground. And I consider myself as African too, because my mom is from Algeria and Tunisia and Morocco. My dad is from Tunisia. So I grew up always going to these countries. And when I arrived in Sudan, for me, the level of political conscience was even more than what I saw during the Arab Spring in Egypt and in Tunisia, because even the men in Sudan, they were feminists. And also the people, they understood the propaganda of political Islam, and how their religion that they love was used to oppress people. So there was like two things that were really new. There was like, it was a revolution that was feminist, and it was a revolution that was post-Islamist, where people, they are not against Islam, but they don't want their religion to be used by politicians to put people in jail, to make propaganda, and also a racist propaganda, because Omar al-Bashir, he used Islam and Muslim. He used that against the African tribe, and the people that you see in the film, it's so powerful because they say no. We want to live together in Sudan with all our differences. We don't want these tribes division. We understood that you divided us to always stay in power. You used our differences and you spread hate between people, and people understand that. So this film is really to show a certain level of political consciousness in Sudan that I never saw in any other country in Africa or the Middle East or Arab country. And so I was astonished, and I felt very close to all the Sudanese people I met. And I decided to make a film because I wanted to spread their voice, because I thought Sudanese people, we have to learn from Sudanese people. And I thought if Moroccan people, Tunisian people, Saudis, Egyptian, if they see my film, they are going to learn from what the Sudanese people have to share with them. And also European people, Western people, American people, they have to learn from what the Sudanese people have to teach us. And most of the time, we always represent Africa as a continent suffering of hunger and pain and war and all these things, but we never explain from where this war comes. And the principal reason of the war in Sudan is to destroy what you see in my film. And that's the problem in general in the mainstream media, is that we don't represent the heroes for freedom who are in Africa. And they're not only in Sudan, they are in Syria, they are in Iraq, but they're like underrepresented. There is a youth who is like, because the same year there was this uprising in Sudan, there was an uprising in Algeria, there was uprising in Iraq, in Lebanon. Nobody talked about it. Like, so not enough. So I'm so happy that today someone like you, being based in Canada, coming from the Caribbean, and so your origins are African, and that you get, this story comes to you. That's so beautiful, because the Caribbean is something that's really is dear to my heart. I know the thinker Edouard Glissant. He comes from Martinique, and he created a literature prize for the Caribbean literature. And for him, the Caribbeans was like a space that had a common history. All these slaves that were brought to the Caribbeans, and he said this is like a very specific culture. And so he was inviting writers coming from Barbados, coming from La Réunion, Martinique, Cuba, Brazil, and he made them work together. And I had the chance to attend one of these festivals, and I understood that there is like a black culture that is going across the Caribbeans and going that comes also has like also relation with Africa. And this is what I try to do with my movies, is to create these bridges. So listening to you today with all your background, having this connection with the Sudanese people you saw in the film is wonderful. And this is the future, because we need solidarity between South and South. You know, we need this solidarity wherever we are. And when I screened the movie in the States, I realized, and in Canada, and I realized that the whole world is there, and you can have someone from Congo, someone from Iraq, that can identify to the Sudanese people, and also see how these things are circulating. So we can make a force from all the weakness, you know, the tragedy of all these people who were stolen from Africa and brought to Canada or the US or the Caribbean. Today, you know, you can own your own history and you can reconnect with Africa and understand that your heart can be so close to a Sudanese person and Samian, and create these exchanges that are for me really the future of the world.
Yeah, for me, because of my background, like I grew up I was born in 1983, so I grew up in Barbados at a time where a lot of Caribbean people, a lot of Barbadian people were really trying to get back in touch with our African ancestry, you know, and in a way that we hadn't before. We have like our music, like our calypso and our soca music is very steeped in West African music and rhythms, you know. And so when I watched this film and I heard like again like Allah and Shajane and Maha and all of these young people doing the poetry, and it's in song, and like that's what and it's social commentary. In Barbados we call it social commentary. And like people who don't understand our culture, they come to the Caribbean, they hear our music and they think it's just party music, but it's not, because our music tells a story. You know, our calypso tells very specific stories about political struggle, about colonialism and capitalism, and you know, and gender and gender identity and feminism, and all of these things are encapsulated in our songs, and people can easily overlook it because they don't want to dig deep beneath the surface of the rhythm to the lyrics. But like in this film, it really made me think like Black people are like people from Africa, and like intrinsically use music as a message of social commentary, you know, to address
Exactly.
the ills and everything that's affecting us. And I wanted to ask you about that particularly because I mentioned at the beginning your previous films, like in particular Tunisia Clash and Electro Chabi, like music features very heavily in those two films. And those two films in particular are focused very much about music. They're about music, how music is used intentionally as a political message medium for young people. And I think the difference between those two films in particular and Sudan Remember Us is that the music we hear in Sudan Remember Us is more traditional music, you know, whereas in Electro Chabi and Tunisia Clash, it was more like integrated
It's
with
true.
like hip hop and rap and stuff, whereas in Sudan the music is more traditional. Talk to me about that, because I find that you're attracted to music, and like I read a bit about your bio, like your dad is an author and a poet, and you use that as an influence, you know, and like but so talk to me about the music, because I thought the way you use music is very interesting in this film. Again, like your editing I think is really really brilliant in this film, because there's like scenes where the young men are walking down the street with these giant speakers, and they're not speaking, but they're letting the music coming out of the speakers do all the speaking for them, you know. So like there's ways that you use music in the
It's
editing
true that
process.
in Sudan, you know, people are very in Sudan, the people are very attached to their traditions, and they love it so much. And the young generation knows by heart the old poems and respects the old poets. And there is like this, there is no interruption like between generations of people fighting for freedom, because it's the third revolution that the Sudanese people are doing, which I didn't know before going. I discovered the Arab Spring was like very late, because the Sudanese people they did a revolution and they kicked out a dictator in 64, Haboud, and then they did the same in 85. Nimeri, they kicked him out, and they had like periods of time of democracy. So they have like this knowledge and this experience more than any other country in the region. So that's the first thing. And they don't look up, they don't look to Europe, they don't look to America, which is not the case with like in Electroshabi in Egypt and Tunisia Clash in Tunisia. They had like really like in mind American rap and electronic music and things that come from the West. It's not the case in Sudan. People are like so proud of their roots, and they don't need anyone. And they're not like trying to make a democracy like the democracy that exists in the West. They're not looking up. They're just looking to themselves, and they have 30,000 years of history. This is also a pharaonic civilization, which is different from the Egyptian one. The Black Pharaohs, they come from Sudan, and they really existed. Cheikh Anta Diop, he wrote a book called The Black Pharaoh. Some people said it's a myth, but it's not. It's real. It's the Kush kingdom, 200 pyramids in Sudan, queens of pharaoh queens in Sudan, and this tradition of the matriarcha comes from very, very far. So Sudan is a huge civilization, and these people, they resisted to so many invasions and people trying to occupy them. To be honest, for this film, I didn't choose the angle of music. It was everywhere, and Sudanese people, they just recite poetry as they breathe, and it was like so present that even if I didn't want, it would have been there. But then the film was also very difficult to shoot because many times I was like planning things and then something terrible happened and I can't do it anymore, or you go somewhere, it's destroyed, you don't find this person. So it was very difficult to edit, and finally we decided to edit it as a poem and to use the music as the rhythm of the film, and to accept that the film is not going to explain everything or give us all the political background, or because I didn't film all the things I wanted with every character. I had planned so much more. So at the end, we created also with the material we had, and we said, okay, we have this material. It's so beautiful. So let's make something of it. And by the way, talking about all the things I have that are not in the film, I'm planning with a student who is doing her PhD about Sudan to create a website with a map of the city and with some dates. And so when you click, you can see some of the beautiful footage that I have that is not in the film, because we really wanted with the editor to create a movie where we never repeat twice the same idea. And there is beautiful poems who are like similar, but you have to choose. But sometimes like you're like, okay, but this footage is so precious, we have to share it. And this is the plan for the next step about that. And it's a
Well,
very organic movie. It's like really my experience, my journey, how I felt. I filmed with my heart. It's a heart to heart movie. It's a story of friendship because the whole story started in Paris. I met Sudanese people, refugees in Paris. I shot the previous film in Paris, Stalingrad, and then these Sudanese friends, they were like so frustrated they couldn't go back to their country during the revolution, because this revolution was something they were dreaming of for years. So this is how I found myself traveling there. So everything is very spontaneous, and also I was alone. I didn't have a team, so it's really a movie done with the heart, and that's maybe why there is so much emotion in the film, because it's
no,
not
there
a
is.
classic documentary.
It's not, because I thought though also, because I was going to ask you about that. I know we have to wrap up, but I was going to ask you about the perspective of filming, because I imagine like the camera is eye level almost consistently throughout the film. So you're giving us an eye level view of everyone that you speak to and everything that you see. You know, there's no dramatic camera pans, no dramatic like cinematography, anything. It's very much like I'm standing here and I'm filming exactly what I'm seeing. And I think that's what really makes it I think personal as a film, because as the audience, we're seeing everything from your perspective. We're seeing the perspective. We're seeing it from the perspective of a person in Sudan as all of this upheaval is happening. You know, it's not about dramatics. You know, it's not about fancy editing. It's not about fancy cinematography or even like a super dramatic score. You know, like you're letting the sound of Sudan be the score. You know, you're letting the sound of these young people, their poetry, their
Exactly.
music be the score.
And that's why I think for the audience it's a great experience, because it's like making it's a 1 hour and 15 minutes, and you make this journey and you don't have time to realize, and you just go with the flow. You feel close to these people, you have emotions with them, and when the film is done, you just want to know more about Sudan, you want to learn more, you want to listen to more music. And I think that's the most beautiful thing. And you don't have time to get bored about something, or it's just like you dive into this country from the point of view of very young people, ordinary citizen. It could be you, it could be me, and you can identify yourself. So yeah, you're perfectly right. That's why that's what's the idea of the film. And I'm so happy that people around the world can make this experience. Because it's true, when you watch documentaries, sometimes it's, as you said, it's from above. It's like a voiceover that is gonna tell you how to understand things, and but I wanted to leave like the space for the audience to make her own point of view.
Yeah, no, like even the voiceovers that you do, where you do it, like it's like you did the voiceover after with editing, like it's very much reflective, you know. It's almost like you're writing a diary. You're sharing your thoughts that you're writing in a diary about everything you saw on the film, you know. And so it's not.
Yeah, I like to say it's a love letter. I like to say it's a love letter to Sudan. The voiceover.
It is, and I hope more people. I hope so many people get to see it and donate. There's so many different organizations like Darfur Women and Women in Action. There's like SAPA,
yes,
and all these different organizations that I do try my own personal best to share their tweets and also the fundraisers, because like right now in Al Fashir, there is
also Sudanese kitchen.
Right, there's the Sudanese kitchen and cartoon aid kitchen. And I'll be putting links for all of those in the description box. But like, I just want people to realize there's all of these NGOs and different organizations that are raising funds for Sudan and for women's aid in particular, because a lot of women have been sexually assaulted and raped by the RSF militias. So like, there's all of these different organizations to donate to and to become aware of the different issues like the famine in Sudan right now in Al Fashir. And so, but thank you so much for taking the time for speaking to me, Hind.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It was a real pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I know you have to go now, but I hope you have a good day. Enjoy the rest of your day. And I hope so many more people see this film. And I can't wait to see if you when the website with the student happens.
I can show you.
Let me know.
Oh, I can show you where I am because I'm in Morocco.
Oh.
So yeah, so you can see the landscape. I'm in my country.
Beautiful. Yes. I would love to. I want to come to like Africa and like to the Middle East one of these days. It's beautiful. So green.
Yeah, so welcome anytime. Welcome to my place in Morocco.
Thank you so much, Hind. Have a good day.
Have a beautiful day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.